State meanings. As a noun. 1. A tiny or scarcely detectable amount. 2. The ninth letter of the Greek alphabet.
Welcome to IoTA for Thursday, August 11th, 2016. I'm Tony Lynn. IoTA is a daily news podcast focused on the Internet of Things industry and a little bit of flavor about Atlanta when possible. Mobile World Live reports that China's second largest mobile operator, let me move this up a little bit, announced that they had more than 20 million IoT connections. They have deployed over 500,000 base stations connecting 360s in 31 provinces. This is purely for IoT. They've got certainly a lot more base stations for their G4 network, but this is only for their IoT network. They still have it's still a minor number compared to their 286 million total connections through all of their mobile devices. Although they've seen significant growth in IoT, they filed a profit warning stating that the cost of deploying the network is offsetting by the revenue. So basically, they're investing in their future and it's costing them right now, but they'd rather take the hit now than later. Now, this is China. This obviously is not an Atlanta story. It's not really a US story. But I think the interesting thing here to note is that these things are happening in large countries like China where they're actually developing entire IoT networks just for them. You've heard me talk about before about the fact that some of the carriers here in the States seem to think that they're going to always kind of control this, and that in some instances, even developers of this seem to think that 2G, 3G, LTE are going to be where everything's going to be over the next several years. However, locations like China and even Amsterdam, the LoRaWAN networks, that they're starting to show that no, we're probably going to have networks completely dedicated to this. And I'll go back to the satellite story from yesterday. We start to see that these things are becoming very, very needed, and we're going to see a lot more of these as we go forward. And I do think that the carriers might be a little worried at this point, and I think if they don't start doing what the China's carriers are doing, then they might be left behind. Moving along. The 2016 IoT Evolution Product of the Year Award for Innovation and Market Leadership was just awarded to Senet, S-E-N-E-T, as reported in Business Wire. Senet was the first, and they claim to be the only provider of low-power, wide-area networks, LPWAN, for long-range LoRa IoT applications. They currently cover 100 cities in the U.S. All right, so this one segued perfectly into the previous story. They just won the award for having a network that is specific for IoT, is really what they're saying. And I probably should have reread my lineup so that I didn't make that mistake. The interesting thing is that they said that they're the only provider of low power wide area networks. I'm not really sure that's completely true. I mean, yeah, they're doing LoRa, but the LoRaWAN implementation is already spread throughout many of the cities in the US. They don't cover 100 cities yet, but they're certainly not the only player in this market. But you know what? Business Wire is always about a PR release or a press release, and I'm sure that somebody in their marketing group, made this sound like they wanted it to sound. But again, more evidence that these things are really about to take off. Bylan Allison, and I thought I mistyped that, but an International Business Times reports that Ethereum's Lightning Network, called Raiden, Lightning Network is actually the brand name of this type of network, but Ethereum has their own called Raiden, are now bringing micropayments to IoT devices, or they will soon. By using blockchain to minimize the amount of data broadcast throughout the network, Ethereum has conducted a proof of concept sending tokens throughout Europe and Africa. So a couple decision points here, or discussion points. One, the idea of using micropayments in IoT is when it comes up a lot. I've not read a lot about it. I've not reported about a lot, but just recently in the IoT meetup I went to earlier this week, this came up quite a bit, and particularly right around using blockchain for it. Now, there's still, even within the Atlanta community, there's still a wide discrepancy from those who think that blockchain is going to solve all these problems, and even down to the security level. And there are others that think that this is a big waste of time. I don't have an opinion on this yet. I'm still learning as to what both sides have to say, and I'll hold an opinion until then. But the fact that even outside of that, the idea of micropayments came up many, many times. That the real discussion around this is that as you have a device and the device needs to get information from networks that are not its own, how do you handle those kind of payments? In our old world, our old model is that we would pay for some sort of subscription, and we would have to do arbitration at the end to find out did we use all that we thought we were going to use, and so on and so forth. But this actually gives us a really good way to actually only pay for what we use. So that if a device has to grab information from another network or from another device, then it's giving it just a fraction of a cent to hold in an escrow until such time as it needs to cash out. This is phenomenal, and there's a couple of ideas that come along with that. Is like, well, then how does the final payments happen? Is there a reconciliation? That's for fintech to solve. I'm not really worried about that just yet. But the other part of it is that again, blockchain being used as some way for security in part of these. We've talked a lot about security here and the lack of it, and we did talk earlier a couple weeks ago about maybe blockchain being a way to solve that problem. Well, now here blockchain is being talked about purely from an exchange of currency, if you will. So can blockchain solve both the problems, and is blockchain the right answer? I'm sure some of you have an opinion and you're gonna let me know, but till then, let's carry on. Information Week carries a story by Charles Babcock discussing the company C3. In the article, he states that C3 is quickly becoming a powerhouse in IoT despite it being a startup. C3 currently has 11 practical applications, including one of the largest IoT public utility systems deployed. Babcock thinks that in many ways C3 has already surpassed GE, even with their predicts rollout that they've had recently. For example, and this is why he says this, a single customer of C3 collects more than 350 gigabytes of data per day, and a 7 billion-year-old database having already collected more than 750 terabytes of data. Wow, that's a lot of data. I guess the real question is, what do you do with that data? I'm sure they're hiring up all the data scientists they can find to sort through that. I'm only reported on this from the fact that it is a startup, and its startup is making huge strides in the industry. I had a discussion with a gentleman yesterday who I'm trying to get to come on and do an interview with us maybe in the next couple of weeks. But one of the statements that he was talking about was the fact that all of this, all the data that we completely lost my train of thought. He's talking about the fact that most of IoT has been around for forever. It's just like us calling big data, even though it's been around forever. And the cloud, oh God, the cloud's new. Well, no, the cloud, we've had client server for since computers were invented. The fact that IoT, as we now know it, is new is a fallacy. We've had connected devices for many, many, many years, and in fact, companies such as AT&T and GE and Honeywell and many of these other ones have been doing these kind of things for forever. And now that it's called IoT, suddenly there's this new push. Now, so all those companies that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years in some cases are now at risk from startups coming in and disrupting the model, which to me, that's fascinating. That's awesome. I love the fact that we can come in and make those kind of changes, and that as a startup, you have that opportunity to play with the big boys, if you will. So I reported on this purely from the standpoint of if you're thinking about getting involved in this, don't hesitate. If you've got an idea, let's find out if it works. Lisa Lacey of The Drum asks, is the IoT inevitable or overblown? In the article, she discusses the acceptance of IoT and mass market consumerism. And while most digital marketers say that the revolution is already here, they caution that we are still in the early adopter stage, and that it can still fail in the chasm, if you will. Of course, as with any paradigm shift in technology, there will be a litany of failures on the path to transformation as people apply old world thinking to new capabilities, added Jake Bennett, the CTO of the digital agency Pop. He goes on to say, but although there hasn't been an iPhone level success story yet in IoT, it would be a mistake to ignore the inevitable suggested by long-term trends. Now, it's important to note that this article is written from the standpoint of digital marketing. So at first, as I was reading through it, I thought they were talking about how they can use IoT to do marketing. It's not really what they were talking about, although they did hit upon that briefly. What they're really talking about is how does the common consumer, accept IoT into their lives, and I think the big thing to note here is that there's not been a killer app yet. Let's go back in history a little bit and take a look at, prior to the iPhone taking off, there was really not a real killer app. Now, you could argue that BlackBerry was the first one into it, but BlackBerry really wasn't a smartphone. It was really just a smart email machine, if you will. Going back to tablets have been around for forever, and they just never took off until the iPad came out. And so you really need that killer device. I said killer app, but the killer device in order to go forward. Now, Apple thought that the iWatch was going to be the next, killer device, and it really hasn't been. I mean, you see a lot of them, but you don't see a whole lot of them. Google Glass certainly wasn't the big killer that they thought, although, Google will be quick to point out to you that it was just an experiment. They never really wanted to do anything with it. All of these IoT type devices, there's not really been one that has taken off dramatically. Now, you might argue that the Amazon Echo might be the next great one. The Echo is phenomenal. I have one in my house. I love it. Talk to her daily. It's almost like we have a thing. It's kind of weird. Just decent. But the fact of it is that they're still fairly expensive and they're not everywhere. Nest certainly is not the killer app. So what is the killer app going to be? And are we going to, is IoT, as far as consumers are concerned, is it going to die on the vine? Is it ever going to take off? I certainly think that in the industry side of the house, and we're looking at Industry 4.0 right now, and IoT has always been part and parcel to industry. And now with it becoming ubiquitous and coming to the point where it's a lot cheaper to implement these kind of things, that it's not going to go away there. The question is, does it cross the chasm? I'm interested to see what you got to think. I know you guys have an opinion on this. Please let me know. I'll be happy to read your emails if you send them along. All right, well, that concludes our show for today. If you like what I'm doing and you want to see more of this, and maybe you want to see this get a little bit more professional as we go along, feel free to support me or support the show at patreon.com/tonamuck. I'd love to hear your feedback, any comments that you might have, any stories of the day that you might want to submit. You can email me at tonamuck@gmail.com. You can always find me on Twitter at tonamuck, or any of my projects at www.tonamuck.com. Until tomorrow, have a great day.